What's up, Patreon supporter Patrick Higgins and everyone else watching this? This episode of the GameOverGreggy Show is brought to you by ProFlowers. I've kept it pretty quiet, but did you know that I recently got married? And you know what my wife loves? Flowers. Now, will your significant other like flowers? I don't know. I don't believe in gender stereotypes, but I do know the old saying, it's the thought that counts. So count on ProFlowers! You can get $10 off your purchase of $29 or more over at ProFlowers is what I keep trying to say. And that includes their 100 blooms bouquet, a dozen red roses, and their plant gifts. And plants make me think of Poison Ivy from Batman, and that's pretty cool. Not the Poison Ivy from Batman and Robin. That one sucks. So show someone you're thinking of them and save a buck doing it. Go to ProFlowers.com and enter the code Greggy at checkout. That's ProFlowers.com with the code Greggy. ProFlowers. What else are you going to send them? A shoe? I can use that tagline for everything, right? Yeah. Thank you. Jared, what's your topic?
Okay. So when I came in with a variety of topics in my back pocket. Mm-hmm. I had thought about this and I thought about that.
You're like, hey, what about James Bond? I'm like, well, Nick is the only. Nick knows a lot about that.
So we're not talking about James Bond, or are we going to talk about?
You're like, what about Macklemore? I'm like, that was a Tim topic.
So Greg said, hey, why don't you talk about something a little more serious?
Sure.
So. Serious or frivolous, depending on your perspective, because this is a pretty wide open one. For those of you who don't know, I don't talk about this as much publicly. I used to be terrified to talk about it, especially after I moved out here, because it's a part of my background that for a while I was uncomfortable sharing with people, because I think a lot of presuppositions come along with it, and those presuppositions are often justified. But eventually, Greg found out and started calling me, I believe you called me the Wiki Wonder Kid for a long time.
Yeah.
But you changed the moniker you laid upon me to the Reverend.
Because on One Beyond, you finally stumbled in. You're like, oh, yeah, and I used to be a reverend for a long time and preach. I'm like, what?
I was a member of the clergy, still ordained, and they haven't taken it away yet. We'll see when that happens. But I want to ask you about theology.
Okay.
And specifically, at this point in your life, I want to ask you what, if anything, God means to you at this stage in your life. Whether that mean absolutely nothing, whether that be frustration or hostility at how that's been used, whether that be something very personal. Right now in your life, who's God? What's God?
This is an intervention for you, Greg.
What?
I got a long answer for this one.
Go for it.
You guys want to go first? Or?
No, you go.
I can go first and get it over with.
Go for it.
Okay. So this is a topic that's always been tough for me to talk about and even think about. But I don't necessarily know what is out there. I don't feel like I believe in anything. I think that there's something out there, but I don't think to me, it's not this all-knowing, all-helping sort of being out there. I just see too much shitty things going on in the world, and it always makes me wonder, like, if people believe in this, why does all this shitty stuff happen, you know? Mm-hmm. And so that was always my confliction. And that's been since, I was like fucking 8 years old or 7 years old. Like, just always doubting and not ever, always being, always questioning my pastor back in the day. And
so you grew up in a church environment?
Yeah. My family are Lutheran. My mom grew up Catholic and then switched over to Lutheran.
She had a Reformation.
I guess my dad just made her. But I had to, I was involved with the church. I went did Sunday school, and I, did my communion and all that stuff. But it was always a tough topic for me, especially because my parents are religious, and to this day they'll still text me, hey, God bless you, don't forget to pray and stuff like that. And and it's always something.
Text back, you playing the guitar.
Yeah, like, shut up, Mom. I'm snorting coke or whatever. No, it's always tough for me to interact with them about that stuff, because I'd feel like it would be disingenuous for me to say, like, sure, God bless you back or whatever, because I know deep down I probably don't mean it, because I just don't. I'm doubting everything. I'm very just pessimistic by nature, so that's my sort of stance.
You mentioned a contrast. This was almost what I asked, instead of just saying where's God in your life right now. There's this word theodicy, which is the question of God and evil. It's something that's literally as old as Job or older. Question people have been asking for thousands of years. If God exists, why are things so awful? and you talked about thinking about that as an 8-year-old. Do you remember the first time that question rose for you? Do you remember what brought that contrast into your mind?
I think it might have been like the, oh God. Because I remember talking to my pastor about soldiers killing people in war.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And even my pastor was like, oh, fuck. Like, are you kidding me? Yeah. Rest in peace, David. Great guy. I don't remember what war it must have been the
Iraq.
Iraq, yeah. No, it must have been Iraq actually.
Right.
When that sort of started brewing up, and that's when I was like, man, they're just like, do soldiers get forgiven? Like, who's on whose side? Like, it was just always very confusing to me, and to this day, I still try not to even think about it.
Okay.
Just because I know that in some way it disappoints my parents. Because we are Hispanic, and like I think it's probably one of the worst things to tell your family if you're Hispanic that you are not feeling super religious. I feel like I'm more sort of agnostic. Like I think if there is something out there, I don't want to say that there's not, because I'm just not that definitive about anything. Yeah, that's probably where I stand.
It's interesting you frame it in terms of your family identity. Largely, like about your relationship to your mom and dad. That's fascinating.
Even everybody. Like I think I'm probably one of the only people in my family who maybe thinks that way, or is brave enough to even talk about it. You know? I don't know.
100%, Jared. I believe in a God. I raised Catholic, went to parochial school, kindergarten through 8th grade.
I didn't know you were Catholic.
No, that's not right. I'm sorry. Kindergarten through high school. Well, I'm not anymore.
Yeah, I didn't know you were high school. Okay.
That's something I feel Catholic school is really good at beating out of you, is being Catholic. Like, well, that doesn't make any sense. And you're a dick, but you're telling, I don't know about that. Yeah, going to college was the first time I went to school without a uniform on and didn't have religion class and didn't have school assembly prayer and didn't have, a church attached to the building, at least in grade school.
In every room.
Oh, yeah, big time. You know how it's about. But the thing about it for me is, like, I think, so I believe in God. I don't believe in the Catholic Church. I don't believe in that, because for me, what got difficult with it was when people wanted to start putting barriers to God in front of me. Of like, okay, you need to confess your sins to this priest, and then he'll tell you what to do, or you need to do, blah blah blah, or like the Pope is saying this about that, and that's why there's no women clergy, and this, and it's like, well, there's like. That doesn't feel like I'm on the same page with you about that. I wasn't on the same page with them about abortion. I wasn't on the same page about gay, and I wasn't on the same page about a million other things, right? And for me, it was the fact of, to the question of like, why do bad things happen to good people, right? From an early age, I was able to divorce myself from that, of like, that's not my view of God. You know what I mean? Like, I feel the presence of God every day, but not a God I pray to. A God I say thank you to every so often about this, that, or the other. But I always go back to, I don't think I can wrap it into words, wrap my head around it, explain it to people. But for me, it's always like, well, there's no proof of God, right? Because I think people are looking for the Jesus miracles and this, that, and the other, and water, wine, I'm floating. I'm doing all this different stuff. Where for me, like the proof of God to me, and again, this is, I've talked about it before, how small my brain is though, is this, like looking, seeing right now. Like this is so complex. And I understand evolution and I believe in evolution. I'm not saying that didn't happen, but I feel like there was a divine influence somewhere to get us here. This is so confusing. And like, I think about all the time of if I was blinked into another dimension tomorrow or whatever, and like, they were back in caveman times and I was trying to explain the pen, the table, like, how did you make this shiny glass? I'm like, I don't fucking know. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you don't understand how complicated any of this is.
How do radios work?
Yeah, exactly. Fucking magnets. How do they work? You know what I mean? Like, there's a million different things. But it's like, it's that of like, how complicated my fucking eyeball is to beam the message to my brain for me to understand it, and that we all see theoretically the same way and all these different things. But then it's also the thing of like, I talk about this all the time and it's a stupid one, but for sure, my entire life, when I walk down streets at night, lights will burn out streetlights. Yeah. And it happens to everybody, but for me, it happens at such an alarming rate that if it was happening for everybody at the rate it happened to me, the whole street would be dark. Okay. And so for me, I feel like that's just always a gentle nudge of like, oh, something's happening. There's something happening here.
You see that as portentous.
Yeah, yeah. And so I don't believe in a God who's guiding this or doing that, but I do believe in the fact that I'm a good person. I try to be Superman. I try to live my life to these values of help other people and do whatever. And that's always the other thing too, of like, people are like, what would Jesus do? And I'm like, nah, I don't believe in that. What would Superman do? You know what I mean? Like that's what I've been able to wrap my morality around. Right. But like, I've had every blessing in the world. I've had every break go my way. I've had everything I ever dreamed of come true. Like, Granted, I think part of that's work ethic, part of but I mean, part of it is the family I was born into, the opportunities I was afforded, the way it all happened. But and I'm not trying to take away and say it was all a master plan, but I do feel if I was a complete asshole, like I'm a big guy, karma will settle any score. You know what I mean? I don't need to do this. I don't need to do that. So I live my life the way I want to and try to be a good person and try to rise above it and not get in the mud and wrestle around with people for no reason.
So you see God as a part of a very complex series of things.
Yeah.
It sounds like a pretty holistic perspective. When it comes to that Theodicy question, you said, I don't really see involved in that. Do you feel like God just kind of steps back and lets things happen?
Yeah, that's the thing. And that's where I think my brain's too small in the spectrum, right? Of like, I can't explain to you what it is. But like when Colin and I would talk about this, whether it be on a show or over beers or something, he'd always say, well, you know, it's what's going to be the breaking point for a lot of people is when aliens show up finally or make contact and there's life outside of ours and that will shatter religion. I was like, but it wouldn't shatter mine. Like in my definition of it, I believe there's life out there and I don't think that's dissuaded from it, and I don't. But I don't like. For me, it's the biggest question that it's come back to over and over and over again is just like, how could there at some time have been nothing? I get the Big Bang, I get the universe expanding, but how did those elements get there? And like, how has there always been something? That just doesn't make sense to me. And that's like,
so you recognize the incomprehensible, and you find God to be a part of that spectrum.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I think it's one of those things I'll never have the answer. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that's what it's about for me. But
so already two friends, two vastly different perspectives.
Right. But that's why we don't talk
I
anymore.
have one thing that I want to add to mine
Here we go.
that I have to sort of draw out because
Jesus.
it's kind of confusing. Okay, so
Can we get Skycam, Kev?
No, we don't need Skycam. It's fine. It's a little bit more serious of a topic. And this is when I was in middle school. My dad, his uncle and his aunt and his three cousins, which are I called them my uncle and my aunt, and I didn't say great uncle or whatever.
Yeah.
So my uncle and my aunt had 3 children, right? And so my uncle. It's Maria, Odin, Robert. So my
Odin?
Odin, yeah.
Awesome.
Hold on, yeah.
That's fucking awesome.
Wow.
So my uncle died of cancer, right? Which really broke my heart. I spelled cancer wrong. Which really broke my heart when I was in middle school, right? And then my aunt had Alzheimer's.
Right.
My cousin Maria had. She was born mentally disabled, and she couldn't talk. She needed assistance her whole life. And Odin had cerebral palsy, and Robert had back pains.
Yeah.
And there was always this weird issue with that. So eventually, my uncle Ezekiel died, and then my aunt Manita died, and then my cousin Maria got breast cancer, and she died.
Jeez.
And then Odin with cerebral palsy died as well, and they were all like 40. Like the sons and the daughter, the sons and the daughter were around 40ish, maybe 50. And my uncle and aunt were around 80 or so. And then Robert just had back pains, right? So finally, at the final funeral, when Odin died, and all his family was gone, he was just sort of standing there, and he was like, "They're all gone. Like I'm alone." And that was a moment for me that, even while everything else was happening, while everybody else was going through their problems and everything, I just couldn't stop thinking, like, why would such a family be cursed in this way? And granted, there are tons of families out there who have gone through probably worse, but it was just such an eye-opening thing for me. And when he said they're all gone, I was like, man, like, you don't deserve this, and they didn't deserve this, and like, what for, And that I forgot that this was one of the moments that really sort of drove the point home to me. Like, I don't know if
What kind of God would allow this?
yeah, exactly.
What did Robert think? Afterward? What did Robert think afterward?
I don't know. He was always very quiet. He's a super quiet man. He lives back in Austin. But I know that when my uncle died at first, I think it was just general sadness, right? I mean, he's still a believer. I assume so. I assume he's still religious. But for me, it was kind of eye-opening for me.
Yeah.
And I think that was like, ironically enough, a come to Jesus moment of like, I don't know if this is, I don't know if I should believe in this anymore.
That would have a profound effect on you. Yeah.
So that's one thing I wanted to throw out before we moved on to Danny.
Right. Probably the opposite side. Maybe it seems like we have a fairly similar in terms of our education and upbringing and whatnot. Like I grew up in a profoundly Catholic country, probably similar actually to a lot of like sort of Latin America, right? Where it's that whole, it's like wrapped so deep into the culture and into how like families interact with each other, and that whole idea as well of like people, God being like an important part and the disappointment you get, right? When somebody like a kid decides not to be religious anymore. So I grew up Catholic, like actively so, went to mass every Sunday with my parents and family, prayed every night. And then my sort of, we talked about it a bit on Pockets a couple of months back, where my OCD and depression was sort of kicking in at around the time that my sort of I guess that my idea of what religion was starting to mature a bit outside of I grew up in a country where Catholicism is thrown at me every second of the day in the morning in Ireland, where they play the Angelas, you hear the bells going off, where in school, there's a cross in every, it's like constant, right? And then having this sort of idea of like, get a wider understanding of the world, and then saying, I don't really believe in this and this and this and this. And like this all going on as well with like, up north, there's like Catholics versus Protestants war basically going on for a lot of people who
How long's it been going on for?
I mean, like the troubles since the Good Friday Agreement was signed, like there hasn't been active like paramilitary like stuff going on up there. Every once in a while, there's a tragic like a policeman is shot, or there's somebody assassinated, or there hasn't been bombs and stuff like that for a long time. Gotcha. Like that was pretty bad in the 70s and 80s, and then the 90s, and then it all kind of got relatively resolved. I mean, pretty much.
Do you have memories of it as a child?
So I grew up in Waterford, which is about as far from the north as you can get.
Oh, okay. You're from
and
south,
so like it was more like this is happening to a community which is almost identical to me, but we're very privileged enough to be away from it. Okay. And like my parents were in Dublin when the Dublin bombings happened, when the Unionists detonated some bombs in center of our capital. But for the most part, that stuff was happening in the north. But it was like so about Catholic versus Protestant, and our sort of antagonistic relationship with Britain, specifically with England, to be honest, was sort of based in this sort of Catholic versus Protestant thing, which largely it has nothing to do with that. It's like Celtic versus Rangers. Like it's not like every Celtic fan is going to Catholic mass and every Rangers fan is going to Protestant mass, and that's why they hate each other. It's religion and culture to me were like identical. Yeah. Like, and they were very hard to separate. So that, I guess, I got to the stage where I was every night I was like doing my Hail Mary and my Our Father and doing my little prayer, and then I was doing 6 Hail Marys and 12 Our Fathers, and then I was doing blah blah blah, blah, and you can tell where this is going. And then eventually when I needed to go to like a psychologist or a psychiatrist to talk about it, it being Ireland, my mother said, would you like to talk to a priest first? And I was like, I don't want to talk to a priest first. Let's also roll in all the molestation stuff that was happening in Ireland. And it was also happening in America, I've since learned, in Boston and whatnot. And like Christian Brothers in Ireland beating kids, and the nuns and the Magdalene sisters and all that sort of stuff. And I grew up, and I had an aunt and an uncle who again were grand aunt and grand uncle, who was like a nun and a monk, right? And I went to my high school. There were like brothers living there. I used to go upstairs and talk to Brother Ben, and he's a man who like devoted his life to the faith, and like somebody who when I go home in the summer I'm gonna pop in and say hi to. Like these are people I love and respect. But my sort of divorce from it was quite aggressive or like angry. Like I was pissed off. I was like, I bought into this nonsense. It was forced upon me. Now I'm getting out of it. And the idea of what God is to me from that moment on was very much sort of connected to society's requirement for God to exist.
When you said that moment, what was the catalyst for the moment of decision?
I think like it was a bunch of different things. It was me getting the idea that perhaps the like New Testament stuff, like the Jesus, whoever that was as much a real person as it was a myth that was interpreted in different ways. And I mean, you only have to look at like Lutheranism, Catholicism, Protestantarianism to like see the differences that have happened there already, right? So like if you're going back 2,000 years, it's like, okay, well there's a lot more shit going on, right? I don't even know anyone who's Greek Orthodox, but I bet if I talked to them, they'd have some interesting ideas about what was going on.
Yeah, they'd have some things to say about the 11th century, definitely.
Right?
Yeah.
So it was that, and like just the wider, like even like stupid things like watching that first Zeitgeist movie, right? Which is like a load of it's nonsense now, but like a lot of actually most of it, especially all that the terrorism stuff, but like
I don't remember this movie. What was this movie?
It was like one of those
3-parter sort of like documentary thing that went viral back in the day when people were downloading shit from like Kazan.
Sure, okay.
So it was like a 3-parter thing. It was like religion, 9/11, and like finances in America, and like how the system holds people down, and all that sort of stuff.
And it's fairly like it stretches out into like crazy conspiratorial stuff. But there was a seed of just like dissent and thinking differently, and like even like silly things like I watched The Matrix, which is basically a movie about like Descartesian metaphysics, which like or like malicious demon theory and all these things, which like they can also be that's like a different version of religion, right? And especially to a teenager, that's very sexy to be able to see the world in a different way to to everyone else and be like, no, I know what's going on. You're all wrong. So I think like I'm definitely with you in that I believe that there is something that is greater than us, and I believe that we are like fourth dimensional beings, and we are stuck with time as the way we perceive reality, and because of that we can't break outside of that. And so I do think there are things that are outside of our like conscious understanding, but I just think the idea of like God as some sort of
in the clouds
person
pointing,
who like cares about the like moment to moment suffering that we have is just like a little bit too convenient or something. But like
Too anthropomorphic?
yes, very much so. But like all of this is being said with the very like deliberate understanding that I am totally a byproduct of where I grew up and the way I feel about it. That I was a 21st century Irish person during a very rough time for Catholicism in Ireland, where a lot of my friends, broke away from the idea of church. So like, as much as that's how I think about it, I also know that I have no choice and that's how I think about it, because I don't really feel like I have that much agency around this. Like I feel like that happens to me, and I also have no problem. Like I don't think I'm right. But I know that's how I think about it.
That's where I am
yes.
at the moment.
So I have no problem with people who are related. My parents go to mass, and like I don't go on Christmas, but like I'll go like to people's weddings and stuff like that. No problem, right? And every time I pass the church, my hand goes up to do it, and I'm like, and I feel disingenuous, right?
Well,
so
that
I
was
stop myself.
As somebody who never goes to church, you know what I mean? Like when we went to Alexis's wedding or whatever, and we walked in, and it was just like there was holy water, ding ding ding. You know what I mean? Like they go into like Our Fathers and just pick it up, and like I remember Jen looking at me like, well, she has no idea what any of this is, and it's just like. Yeah, this is a force of habit. You know what I mean? You just know all this, and even though different religion, it was like the similar touchstones and all that.
I found myself doing the same stuff going back home, and I visit my family every Christmas because that's just what you do or whatever. And every once in a while, if I'm there early enough, I'll go to the Christmas Eve service at my church back
midnight
home.
Mass or
no. It takes place around like 6 p.m. or so, and then after that, that's when we do the gift openings or whatever. But like even when I'm there, like. I still do the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and I say all the prayers and stuff, and it's not that. Again, it's not a thing that like everybody's wrong and this and that. It's just like it's just how I feel, I guess.
In a weird way, I miss it. I remember playing, I think it was BioShock Infinite or something. I know we don't talk about video games, but I know
you're allowed to talk about video games. You're fine.
But I remember playing, and like, so I was involved in like choirs and stuff, and like I used to sing at church a lot of the times, and like I loved all that, and I have super fond memories of that, and hanging out in the chapel, at lunch break and playing music with my buddies and singing and stuff, and. That whole intro sequence where you're going down and they're singing that song and stuff, like I wanted to cry. I did cry down in that game. It because there's this whole thread of religion that goes through it, and it's so beautiful. Like so much of it is so beautiful, and so much of religion like is beautiful and like unifying and communal and stuff. It's just that I couldn't separate what I felt were like just things that didn't add up to me. Like I couldn't give over myself to the whole thing because I felt so much of it was just made up to make everyone feel better. But I missed like so much of it. I remember like playing that game and feeling like really alone. Like, but like that's the way it has to be, I guess.
I mean, that's the thing of going to Catholic school for so long, and the people you would meet who were following the word and would give a homeless person the shirt off their back or would do anything for it were so outnumbered by complete assholes. I'm just like, what are you fucking doing? Like, why would you be involved with any of this way if that's how you feel and actually act?
Well, I think sometimes most of us want to be Frodo or Sam, and we discover we're Gollum. I mean, and I think I might be stealing that actually from Martin Scorsese. He made a film recently. Did you guys see Silence?
No, I haven't actually. I want to though.
Silence is interesting. I don't know what you'll think of it. It raises some interesting points. There's things I really liked about it, things I didn't like as much, but definitely was fascinated by it. It's a movie about Roman Catholicism in, imagine this, medieval Japan, and or post-medieval Japan, pardon me. And in Silence, there's a character who's truly wretched, desperately wants to be good, desperately wants to be, as he understands it, an ideal Christian, an ideal Catholic. and just can't manage it and keeps getting the people around him destroyed in the process. But I read some things, I think it was Scorsese who made the movie, who said something about the effect of he's fascinated by the idea of the wretched, of people doing their best and just never quite making it. Yeah. And that's as much a foundational part of why religion exists as anything.
Right. Yeah.
And,
Well, I want you to answer this question, Jared, because like you were the Reverend, still legally and all that stuff.
I am the Reverend.
But you are the living example to me of this, of why do bad things happen to good people. Well, you're the best among us, and you've had so much hardship.
Well, you call me the best among you. You're very kind. I don't think that I deserve to have really horrible things happen to me. I'm not Augustinian enough for that. There's so many different ideas in religion, and so many different ideas within the vast scope of the Christian religion. You brought up Protestantism, Catholicism, Orthodoxy. Those three camps right there are home to literally thousands of different strains of belief and hundreds of denominations. So there's a lot of room for different ideas in that. I don't subscribe to the idea, personally, that people are inherently bad, which many parts of Christianity embrace. I tend to be much more Pelagian, much more optimistic about that. I think that's why I make a halfway decent Quaker, is because it's very optimistic about maybe you're just what you are, and maybe you choose good and you choose bad, and every day you make another choice, and sometimes you choose bad and sometimes you choose good. But yeah, bad things did happen to my family and me, just as they've happened to all you and to the innocent that you've known. I have trouble with that constantly. My faith is not knowledge, and it ebbs and flows. I will, when I was pastoring congregations, there were Sunday mornings where, from the experience of love that I'd seen, when I'd seen one person in the faith reach out to another one with a love that was so powerful beyond any human explanation, that I saw something supernatural in the experience, that I saw love beyond human potential at work, cosmic love, and sometimes even miraculous love. And I don't want to dwell on that, but I've seen some really odd things occasionally.
Give me a good one. Don't dwell on it. Give me a good one.
I saw somebody that was terribly sick, and I saw them prayed for, and I saw them never be sick again. Somebody with a terminal illness. I also saw 100 other people with terminal illnesses prayed for that didn't get better. But I saw one that did, and it changed my life.
Sure.
I mean, I don't know what to do with that, because that person, as good as they weren't any better than the people who weren't. I don't know what to do with that. I really don't. It seems almost cruel in its randomness, but it also seems wonderful. But in that expression of human love, I would see wonderful things that made me believe, hey, wow, I need to tell everyone about this Jesus guy and what he says about the way God is. And then I would have mornings where I got up there and I preached because it was my job and I needed a paycheck, and I didn't know if there was a God or not. And I was pissed at him because I'd seen something awful happen. I'd seen someone suffer and wrecked and died, and go, where are you? What are you? Every time I'm right at the edge of, I've screamed at God enough times and walked away that it's almost farcical. The thing is, I keep turning around and running into him, waiting for me. It's like that story of the Good Samaritan, there's somebody that literally comes and picks you off the ground and carries you away. Or the prodigal son. The stories are so beautiful because they're true. The prodigal son is a story about someone who says to their father, and I think we miss this a lot. Do you know the story? You remember this from Sunday school? The prodigal son, there's this guy that goes to his dad, and he's like, Dad, give me all my inheritance now. I'm going to go off. What that kid is saying to his father in the context of an ancient culture is, Dad, I'd rather have your money than you. I wish you were dead. I wish you were dead already so I could have my inheritance. So give me the money, and I never want to see you again. That's the attitude that's being conveyed there. The kid takes everything, says, screw you, walks off, goes, wastes the money, has nothing left to eat, and is like, well, at least I can go be a hired hand. Goes back to his dad because he's got nowhere else to go, and all his friends have abandoned him. And his dad runs out and embraces him and carries him home and holds a feast in his honor and says, my son was lost and he's home. That kind of love. I keep running into that just when I want to believe it can't exist. Just when something awful happens, and it's always through people. So maybe it is just a giant metaphor for human potential? If it is, you know what? Great. Because it's something that inspires us toward a better personhood. But I don't think it's that either. I don't believe it's that. Because there's this tiny little voice that's very rarely here, but sometimes here. It just says, things can be better. I realize that's a weak argument. It's just belief. But that's what it's like for me.
Sure.
Somebody seems to be really patient with the fact that when things get rough, I kind of get angry or get mad or get grumpy or get into myself. And when I come back out, God's a big boy. He can take it. He can take my abuse. He can take my scorn, and he can take me going off and pouting for a while. He always seems to be there afterward.
Yeah.
And he always seems to be like, yeah, it's all right. It's kind of the way you want to imagine you'd be with your kid.
What's always fascinating with me is when people talk about it and they argue about it, and they want to argue about religion, right?
Right.
Whereas for me, all of us having a different interpretation of it is just your belief. None of us have the answer. What does it matter, right? If it all motivates you to be a good person, if you want, I mean, we're all good people. Like, you know what I mean? I know you all very well. And it's like, whatever makes you, fine.
Yeah,
maybe I do die, or maybe I die and I never know anything, which is probably true. But if I die and it turns out it was just fucking lights going out, well, big deal, whatever.
Hey,
You
if
know what
I
mean?
died and it ended up I was wrong, I'd be super jazzed.
I think where some of that comes from, it's two things. And I've seen some of it is a loving concern. In some strains of Christianity, there's a very strong conviction that, you know, people want to evangelize to you because they want to share the love with you.
Yes.
They want you to understand it. They want you to be a part of it. But some of them literally are trying to save you from, you know, burning in hell
Right.
too. They're like, oh God, I'm scared for you.
Sure. Yeah.
I love you. I don't want a bad thing to happen to you.
Sure.
So some of it comes from that. More of it, and I find this especially true in the United States right now, is that Christianity can very easily become a series of answers to very difficult problems to make you feel safe. Sometimes
like
it's
a rule book, or
a rule book, and we need that sometimes. We need a rule book because life sucks and it's confusing.
that's why the Bible was written.
Huh?
Bible's a pretty good rule book.
It can be, except it argues with itself constantly. It was never really intended to be a rule book. That's even the law isn't really a rule book when you look at it. It's more about seriously, look for the good truths that are here. But without digressing, there's a strain of us that would rather be right than be good.
Right. That's something I've experienced, a difference that I've seen from Europe to America, is there is that type of association. I don't know what the word is for it, that's going to sound overly negative, but there is a sort of an idea that, like, oh, you're not religious, so you're like a heathen basically, and you don't understand these answers. Whereas that was never really the case back home. Like, it felt, you know, being religious was a very humble sort of act and like a pious, kind of nice, beautiful thing. Whereas all too often, at least maybe just in the crazy 21st century we live in at the moment, it does get thrown out as this, like, you know, you're either with us or against this kind of thing, which I think then only goes to make people maybe more doggedly dogmatic and more aggressively atheist, because it just
It pushes people away.
right,
Yeah,
which is silly. And that's actually something that, sorry to
No, it's
interrupt,
okay.
that's actually something that, like, I talked to my wife a lot about, because she grew up completely outside of religion in an atheist family, and she feels almost that, like, the idea of having a faith has been robbed from her, because there's all these rule books that you need to be part. You need to pick your clan, and if you're not in one of them, then you just gotta, you know, play solo or whatever. And that's like an interesting, you know, problem to have, I guess.
Yeah.
Yes.
Religion's weird.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
That's what you can. That's the SEO on this one.
Religion is weird. The Game Over Greggy Show topic too. Danny, what's your topic? And also, Kevin, will you open the back windows and bring me more ice?
It got warm again.
Yeah.
I'm glad
was.
I'd worn my
Yeah.
shorts after
Stupid
all.
ass
I was in Oakland. It's
studio.
like 10 degrees warmer.
Kevin, I don't want to be rude, but do you mind bringing some water if you're bringing ice? No. Thank you very much. Nice work.
I'm good. I'm still working my way through these various liquids.
Working my way downtown. You want some ice?
Are you going to a gig?
I did.
Sarah Barry Ellis, is that her name?
No, get the fuck out of here. God, I hate you. No. God, you're a monster.
I only know that one song. It's a great video.
I went and saw Vanessa Carlton.
Vanessa Carlton.
And then I also just got my Michelle Branch tickets.
Oh, okay.
So I'm pretty stoked about that.
Michelle Branch.
Yeah, exactly. Sarah Borealis or whatever is the one Tim's always
Aurora
saying is more
Borealis.
important than either of them. Yeah, Aurora Borealis.
No, he talks about someone else.
Is he? Does he?
Yeah.
Somebody
I
I'd
don't even
never
remember-
heard of that he claims
I
was
don't even
just as big
remember
as them
her
at the
fucking
time.
name, yeah.
Exactly.
Such
That's, she
bullshit.
doesn't matter, Tim.
Yeah.
Anyways, Danny, what's
Thanks.
going
I
on
needed
with
a
you?
bit of a palate cleanser
buffer.
between.
Yeah. Well, serious religion topic now. Danny's bullshit.
I know it's just something so fucking trite. We should have just talked about the Bachelorette instead, but it only
Only
started
Tim would
last
help
night.
you. Only
I
Tim would
know
help,
that's
yeah.
the problem.
I heard the captions were really good.
The captions
For the guy, like what was the one guy? He's like a tickle. He tickles people.
Tickler, yeah, and he did true to form. He tickled
Oh
her
my
right at the
goodness.
I don't know
Ticklish?
what the fuck y'all are talking
Let's
about.
find out. No, got there eventually.
One of my favorite videos ever with Colin was the conversation with Colin.
Yeah.
And somebody submitted it was just tickle Colin.
Oh, really?
And so I did it, and expecting him to not care because Colin is just Colin.
Yeah.
And I did it, and he screams in agony.
Oh,
and
he
it turns
hated
out he's
it.
this whole, and it's launched this whole giant topic about how he hates being tickled, and this is like worst
It's
nightmare.
so
I'm like, holy
strange.
fuck.
But like, yeah,
Thank you
it's
so
like
much.
it's something that's completely like
Thanks, Kev.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks, dude.
Happy birthday. By the time this post will be.
He's got to forget your birthday in the future. So.
Jared wants water, right?
Is that the nice water up there?
You want water?
I wanted water.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. You
You
don't
know, I
have
take
to,
back
though.
your birthday
Yeah,
class.
fuck your birthday.
Someone's listening to this on patreon.com/kindoffunny, and they're getting it on your birthday. They're listening on the Friday that is Kevin Quello's birthday.
Happy birthday
to you. Happy birthday to you. God damn, we're all today. Happy birthday. Happy birthday.
Good stuff.
That was a great episode of the Game Over Greggy Show. If you agree, subscribe here. Like the video. There's nothing really to click on. Go support us on Patreon. Go watch other videos over here. Go check out Kind of Funny Games over there. We're doing a bunch of cool Let's Plays and stuff. Come to Kind of Funny Live 3. Buy a shirt. Why don't you support us on all the Patreons? Did you know that we have a Twitch thing? Maybe you should go there. Did you know that if you have Amazon Prime, you have Twitch Prime as well, and you get a free subscription every 30 days, and you should give that to us. Did you know